Welcome to the Painting Coach, and in this video I'm going to show you how I took my character from Space Marine 2, my Size of the Emperor Tactical Marine, from the video game to the tabletop. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this model as part of the new Kill Team starter set. So without any further ado, let's get off the screen, onto the table, and let's get painting. The first thing I've done is prime the model with Sunset Yellow Spray from Colourforge. Now, if you haven't got this and you can't get it where you live, just paint the model with Averland Sunset, probably over a light prime like Wraithbone or white. That'll give you a good base to get a nice bright yellow. The next thing to do is to block in all the black elements of the armour. So there's quite a lot of black to paint on the model. I'm using AK black, and I'm focusing on things like the arms, the legs, and the weapon casing. I also going to paint the backpack. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will realise that the backpack should be yellow, so stick around because I'm going to show you how to fix that later on in the video. I'm going to start highlighting the black armour by stippling, and the colour I'm going to use for this is going to be Corvus Black, which is a very, very dark grey. If you haven't got this, just mix a tiny bit of white into your black paint until you've got a very dark grey. And essentially, I'm using one of my Artist Opus Series D dry brushes here, the smallest one. I'm just going to stipple this all across the black areas of the model, and this is going to just pick up the parts of the armour that are going to catch the light, and this is just going to give a nice highlight. I'm going to continue highlighting using Eshin Grey, and I'm focusing this on the same areas really that I used Corvus Black in the previous step. I'm also using exactly the same dry brush. I haven't washed it or anything like that. I just wiped the paint off and put the next colour on. And I'm stippling this across the top of the model, in particular those areas like the shoulder pads, which are going to catch a lot of light, just to help with that gradual highlight. The final stippling highlight is going to be with Dawnstone. Again, it's the same brush, it's not been washed, it's just been wiped clean, so there is a little bit of the previous colour paint in there, and that's going to help pull it all together. I am being a bit more precise with this layer. I'm trying to keep it inside the Eshin Grey of the previous step. With the stippling done, it's time to go back in and add a more of a sharp highlight, and the colour I'm using for this is Dawnstone. Now, even though I used it in the previous step, it will have blended down a little bit, so doing some sharp edge highlighting with pure Dawnstone is actually going to stand out quite nicely on the model. Generally, what I'm looking to do, not too much on the brush, a good tip, and just pull it across those really sharp edges to get nice crisp highlights. Again, focusing on those areas that are going to catch the most light. Now, if you're not sure which areas those are, then have a look at where you've already highlighted, because you should have picked those out automatically. Now, I did want to add a little bit of a sharper highlight. You can absolutely leave this stage if you want to. The colour region for this is Grey Seer, and this really is just a tiny highlight on the sharpest edges, because it's a very bright grey in comparison to what we've used so far. And that's going to really just help give some points of interest across the armour, but again, only focusing on those areas catching maximum light. We'll do the leather and the silver metallics next, because we're going to shade them with the same colour. So first off, painting the leather, I'm going to use some Dryad Bark, which is a nice dark brown. It's quite desaturated and is a nice base for some worn leather. So just work your way around painting all of the pouches on your model in this colour. For all the silver metallics, I'm going to use dark aluminium from Vallejo. If you haven't got this, you can use something like Lead Belcher or Surcoat Silver from the Two Thin Coats range. Generally, you're looking for a dark silver colour. Now, I'm going to paint all of the elements I want to be silver. So there's elements of the weapon. There's obviously the mechanical arm on this model, the grenade. And I'm also going to paint the chest eagle with this as well. Now, I said earlier that we're going to wash them using the same colour, and for that, we're going to take Nuln Oil. So we're just going to paint this all over the leather areas, and we're going to paint it over all the silver areas. Now, it's worth saying it's important to be careful with this, because whilst we are going to touch up the yellow later on, the less repair work we have to do, the quicker it's going to be to get the model finished. To highlight all of the leather, I'm going to take some Gorthor Brown, which is a lighter desaturated brown. It's still quite an earthy tone. And what I'm looking to do is drag it across the sharp elements of the model so you get a nice crisp highlight. But I'm not trying to do this too sharply. If there's a bit of jaggedness in there, or you want to paint some blotches or some streaks across the leather, that'll really help as well, because it just makes the leather look that little bit more worn. Now, if you do make any mistakes, you can always go back in with some Dryad Bark just to touch it up if it is a little bit too thick. For the silver, I'm going to use Chrome from Vallejo Model Air. Now, if you haven't got Chrome, you can use something like Runefang Steel. Any bright silver will work here, and generally I'm looking to highlight the parts of the model that are facing upwards and catching the most light. Now in some places you can get a good tip on your brush and drag it along the shape of the model to get that crisp highlight. Other areas such as the scope and the barrel of the bolt rifle, I'm just going to highlight quite big chunks because there's going to be quite a lot of light getting caught. For the purity seal wax, I'm very simply just going to base this using Khorne Red, which is a nice dark red. Again, being careful around the yellow. I'm then going to highlight it using Evil Sun Scarlet, focusing on the raised parts of the wax, and again, taking my time with very little paint. For the purity seal paper, I'm just going to base this using Zandri Dust. Again, take your time. You should be able to do one coat, but if you need two, that's fine. I'm then going to highlight the paper using Screaming Skull. So I'm just using two colours, a base and a highlight, to really simplify this process. Just drag your brush along the edges and the raised bits of paper. So with all that done, it's time to go in and repair any mistakes you made. Now I'm just using an Averland Sunset for this, and I'm going across the model quite quickly, just building up some thin layers to cover, particularly where the black paint has gone down. Once you've got that base colour re-established, I'm going to take some Reikland Fleshshade and use this to shade the model. Now, I'm not going to wash this all over the model. I'm just going to focus on getting it into those recesses and around those bits where I want to get a bit of delineation. If you shade the entirety, then it's going to be a lot harder to clean up afterwards. To clean up any blotches, take some Averland Sunset and again, just rebase over that area. Now, if you've been very careful with Reikland or you've used oils and wiped them away as an example, then you won't have to worry too much about this step, but it's worth going back and checking just to make the highlighting easier. The first highlight is with Yriel Yellow. Now, Yriel Yellow is not a great colour when it comes to coverage, but it does have a very nice finish when you've got that coverage there. So you may need to do two coats of this highlight, but generally we're looking to catch the sharp raised edges of the model. So particularly around the gorget and across the belt buckle, we can just drag our brush. Where we can't do that, we just need to be very careful and apply a nice consistent edge line. If you make mistakes or it goes a little bit too thick, you can always use Averland Sunset just to patch over it and tidy it up. The last highlight we'll do is with Phalanx Yellow, which is a nice bright sharp yellow. If you haven't got Phalanx Yellow, try adding a touch of white into your Yriel Yellow from the previous stage. And generally with this, we're looking to do the same and cover the same areas. We just want to get a nice crisp highlight, so try and keep it inside the Yriel Yellow. And again, if you do make any mistakes, you can always go back with the previous colours just to tidy it up. On this model, he has thrown a grenade and there's smoke coming out of it. So I wanted to show you how to paint that. It's really simple. The first thing to do is to cover the smoke using Corax White. Now, this should cover in one coat, but you might need two in some places, particularly if you've been a bit messy with the black that you've applied to the arm of the model. When that's completely dry, take some Ashen Grey speed paint from Army Painter and just paint it all over the smoke. Now, before that dries, put a little bit more towards the back of the smoke, which is by the shoulder pad, just so it darkens down, as this gives the impression that the smoke coming out of the grenade is white and then it's getting darker as more of a trail appears. If you haven't got Ashen Grey, you can try using Basilicanum Grey contrast paint, but what I would suggest is that you thin it down with some contrast medium. Now, I said at the start of the video that I made a big mistake with the backpack, but let's turn that into a teachable moment. What's a good way of painting yellow over black? And the answer to that is to paint it white first. Now, if you're going to paint Averland Sunset over this backpack, you may need 4 or 5 layers to get a good crisp finish, and you run the risk of, again, a little bit chalky. So for me, the best way to do it is to take some Corax White and paint this over the black. Now, if you thin it down a little bit, it'll flow quite nicely and cover quite well. You will need to take care not to spill this on any areas you've already finished and not to put it on too thickly. So it's really important that it's completely dry before you go in and add a second coat. Once that second coat's on there, it should be all right and cover quite nicely. You can then go back to Averland Sunset and paint this over the white. Now, because you've gone over the white, this will cover really nicely and really easily. There may be some spots where the coverage is a little light and you need to put a second coat on, but generally this should be fairly easy and straightforward to do to get this finished. And there you see you've got a really nice base coat to go from. In terms of highlighting the yellow, all you need to do is just follow the steps I showed you for the rest of the yellow armour, and then you've got a very nice, easy and simple way of painting yellow over black. And there we have it. This side of the Emperor is done and ready for the tabletop. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how I painted the face on this model. Well, in order to see that, make sure you check out this video here. I used exactly the same technique. It's nice, easy, and very, very straightforward. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. I'll see you next time.